she sang a lullaby to a crying child on the plane, not knowing the father was a billionaire widower. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft rumble of engines filled the cabin, blending with the muted chime of seatbelt signs. It was a red-eye flight from New York to London, and most passengers had already closed their eyes, cocooned in dim amber light. But near row 21, a small child's cries pierced the silence, sharp, desperate, unstoppable. The boy could not have been older than 3. His cheeks were wet, his tiny fists flailing in panic as the man beside him tried everything, whispering, rocking, even offering a toy. The more he tried, the louder the crying became. Passengers turned, sighed, shifted in their seats. A flight attendant approached, her polite smile tight with exhaustion. In the aisle across from them sat Lena Torres, a young woman in a faded denim jacket. Her eyes were tired from a day that had gone completely wrong, a canceled audition, a rent notice taped to her door, and a gnawing ache of homesickness she could not shake. She had promised herself she would rest on this flight, but that sound, a child's sob that cracked on every breath, cut through her chest. She glanced over. The man looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, one hand on the child's back, the other gripping the armrest like a lifeline. He was handsome in a quiet, weary way. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his wedding ring absent. Without thinking, Lena unbuckled her seatbelt, rose slightly, and leaned over. "Excuse me," she whispered. "May I try something?" The man looked up, startled. He hesitated, then nodded. Lena crouched beside the child's seat. Her voice came softly, trembling at first, then steady like warm water. "Hush, little one. The stars are awake. Dreams will follow the paths they make." The melody wrapped around the cabin like silk. Her tone was low, pure, unhurried. The child hiccuped, blinked through tears, and then quiet. His breathing slowed. His tiny head tilted against his father's arm, eyes fluttering closed. A hush fell over the rows nearby. Someone smiled. The flight attendant mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Lena exhaled slowly, heart thudding, and started to rise. But the man spoke quietly. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I have not heard that song since my wife." He stopped himself, swallowed the words, and looked away. Lena offered a gentle smile. "It was my mother's lullaby. She used to sing it when storms kept me awake." He looked at her for a long second, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Then he nodded once. "It is beautiful." She returned to her seat. For the first time all night, the cabin was calm. The boy slept peacefully. The father sat still, staring out the window into the ocean of clouds. Lena closed her eyes, unaware that the man beside that window was Adrian Hale, founder of Hale Innovations, one of the youngest billionaires in New York. He had lost his wife 2 years earlier in a car accident. Since then, every flight, every night, every silence had been filled with the echo of his son's cry. Now, for the first time, that echo was gone, and the voice that silenced it lingered in his mind like a promise he could not name. When the plane landed at dawn, passengers shuffled toward the exit. Adrian looked up to thank her again, but the seat across the aisle was empty. Only a small, worn music notebook lay tucked between the cushions, its pages filled with handwritten lyrics, ink smudged, corners bent. He picked it up carefully, tracing the faded letters on the first page. It read, "Lullabies for the Lost." Oh. Adrian looked toward the empty aisle, his chest tightening. He did not even know her name. But as the sunlight spilled through the cabin windows, he knew one thing with quiet certainty: he would find her. 2 weeks had passed since that flight, yet the sound of the lullaby still echoed in Adrian Hale's mind. In his glass-walled office above Manhattan, success surrounded him: screens, awards, a skyline carved by ambition. But none of it quieted the ache that had followed him home. Every night, his son cried for the woman whose voice had calmed him, And every night Adrian tried and failed to recreate that peace. He had found her notebook tucked safely on his desk now, its pages worn soft by time. The handwriting was delicate, looping, filled with lyrics that spoke of hope, healing, and homes that no longer existed. The first page read, "Music heals the lonely." He had read those words 100 times, not understanding why they felt like a message meant for him. Across the city, in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, Lina Torres stirred a pot of instant soup. The window rattled from the cold wind outside. Bills covered her small table rent, utilities, a medical invoice from her mother's nursing home. The job she had taken teaching music to children had been cut last month when funding dried up. Now she picked up small gigs wherever she could, singing at open mics, playing piano in cafes, sometimes selling her old vinyls just to buy groceries. Her roommate, Mara, peeked through the doorway. "You still thinking about that flight?" she teased. Lina smiled faintly. "A little." The child stopped crying after one song. That felt good. "You sure he was not just tired?" Lina shrugged. "Maybe, but when I sang, he looked at me, like he understood." That night, when the lights dimmed, she opened her phone to record herself humming the same lullaby. The melody trembled, then steadied as her voice filled the room. It was not about performing anymore, it was about remembering what made her feel alive. Across the river, Adrian scrolled through online posts, searching for any clue. He had asked the airline for a passenger manifest, but privacy laws stopped him. He had no name, no address, only a notebook and a voice stuck in his memory. Still, for a man who built an empire from nothing, giving up was not in his nature. The next morning, Lina walked to a local community center to ask for work. The woman at the desk sighed. "We are cutting programs again, dear, unless you can volunteer." Lina hesitated, then nodded. "I will volunteer." She spent the day tuning old instruments, cleaning the rehearsal room, and showing a group of children how to hold a guitar properly. Their laughter reminded her why she had once dreamed of opening her own studio where kids who could not afford lessons would still have a place to create music. When evening fell, she left the center exhausted but lighter. Passing by a corner store, she noticed a charity poster, Harmony Foundation, music for every child. The logo was simple but elegant, a silver treble clef inside a blue circle. She smiled, thinking, "Whoever runs, that foundation understands." Inside a luxury boardroom that same evening, Adrian was reviewing plans for a new initiative, Harmony, a tech-based music therapy program under Hale Innovations. His assistant placed a folder on his desk. "We are partnering with community centers next month," she said. "Would you like to attend the first session?" Adrian looked at the photo on the brochure, a small group of children in a music class, a volunteer smiling behind them. Something in that image tugged at him, a warmth he could not explain. "Yes," he said quietly. "Schedule it. I want to go myself." Meanwhile, back in her apartment, Lina opened her notebook to write new lyrics. Her pencil hovered over the page before she wrote, "Even when no one listens, sing anyway." The city outside buzzed and shimmered, indifferent to her struggle, but she kept writing. The world could take everything: money, comfort, even hope, but it could not take her voice. At that same moment, in another part of the city, Adrian stood by his son's bed. The little boy slept peacefully for once, his tiny hand clutching a stuffed bear. Adrian leaned down and whispered, "I will find her, buddy. The lady who sang to you, I promise." The night lights of New York reflected on the glass. Two souls unaware that fate was already drawing their lines closer. One voice searching for meaning. One man searching for the sound that had saved his heart. Both unaware that soon, kindness given at 30,000 feet would change everything on the ground. The morning sun spilled through the windows of the community center, painting stripes of light across scuffed floors and chipped walls. The children had arrived early, running through the narrow hallways with laughter that echoed like wind chimes. In the middle of the small rehearsal room, Lina Torres tuned an old upright piano. Its keys were yellowed and uneven, but when she pressed them, a faint sweetness still lingered. She was humming softly, the same lullaby she had sung on the plane. The tune always returned to her without warning, gentle, fragile, comforting. It was more than a song now. It had become a prayer, a reminder that even when no one listened, she still had a voice. That morning, a small boy named Theo tugged at her sleeve. Miss Lena, can we learn the song you were singing? She smiled. The lullaby? He nodded eagerly. It made me sleepy in a good way. She laughed, then knelt beside him. All right, but promise me you will not fall asleep before the last note. While she guided the children through the melody, a photographer from the Harmony Foundation entered quietly, taking pictures for the organization's campaign. None of them knew that the man who owned the foundation, Adrian Hale, would see those photos later that evening and stop breathing for half a second when he recognized her face. That afternoon, as Lena packed up the instruments, the center's manager approached. We received an invitation, she said, holding a letter sealed with the Harmony logo. They are offering to sponsor our program. They want to meet the volunteer who started the music classes. That is you. Lena blinked, surprised. Me? But I am not a teacher, not officially. You are the only one who stayed, the manager said warmly. You brought life back to this place. The following day, Lena stood outside a modern office building made of glass and steel. Her second-hand coat felt out of place amid the crowd of professionals rushing past. The receptionist smiled politely as she checked in. Welcome to the Harmony Foundation. Mr. Hale will join you shortly. Lena's hands tightened around her small notebook. She had rewritten the lullaby inside it, adding a verse about courage and kindness. She hoped whoever ran this foundation would understand that music was not about fame, it was about connection. When the elevator doors opened, a man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped out. He carried the quiet confidence of someone used to commanding rooms, but his eyes, deep gray, tired yet kind, were what caught her attention. Miss Torres? He asked, offering his hand. I am Adrian Hale. Thank you for coming. For a moment, her breath caught. The name sounded familiar, but she could not place it. She shook his hand, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her chest. It is an honor to meet you, Mr. Hale. I have heard wonderful things about this foundation. He gestured toward a glass-walled meeting room. Please, come in. I saw the photos from the community center. The children looked happy. His voice softened slightly. You have a gift. Thank you, she said quietly. Music is the only thing that makes me feel useful. He studied her for a beat longer than polite conversation required. Her voice, her tone, it stirred something deep, something he could not quite name. When she spoke again, he finally understood why. As she described her dream of bringing music to every child who needed comfort, a line from that night on the plane echoed in his head. Hush, little one. The stars are awake. He leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Did you write that song yourself? Her eyes widened. You know it? My son knows it, he said softly. It calmed him on a flight a few weeks ago. A woman sang it to him. Her voice. He stopped, disbelief dawning in his eyes. It was you. Lena froze. The little boy with the toy airplane? He nodded slowly. That was my son. Silence filled the room, heavy yet tender. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that fate had just folded their paths together again. Adrian exhaled, his expression a mixture of gratitude and awe. You have no idea what that moment meant to us. You gave my son peace for the first time in years, and you gave me hope. Lena's cheeks warmed. I did not do much, Mr. Hale. I just sang. Sometimes, he said gently, that is everything. He smiled, an unguarded, human smile that made her heart stutter. The foundation is looking for a creative consultant to develop a children's music program. It is a paid position. Would you consider joining us? Her eyes widened again. Me? I do not have a degree. I just volunteer. Oh, Adrian shook his head. You have what cannot be taught heart. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city outside gleamed with the golden light of sunset, and in that quiet, something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. When she finally nodded, her voice was barely a whisper. All right, I would be honored. As he escorted her to the elevator, Adrian glanced at the small notebook in her hands. He smiled faintly, recognizing the worn cover. The same notebook he had found on that plane, now returned to its owner. Fate had not only reunited them, it had given them both a second chance at healing. And neither of them yet knew how deeply that song would change their lives. The first weeks at the Harmony Foundation passed like a quiet dream. Lena Torres arrived early every morning, her small notebook always tucked under her arm, and left long after the offices emptied. She had been hired to help design the new children's music therapy program, but to her, it felt like rediscovering a forgotten piece of her soul. Each day, she met with the creative team, shared her ideas, and played soft melodies on the piano in the corner of the glass-walled studio. The staff loved her warmth, her humility, the way she spoke about music as if it were alive. Yet one person seemed to watch her closer than anyone else, Adrian Hale. He would pass by the studio under the pretense of checking progress. But really, he came to listen. When she sang, he forgot the hum of the city outside, forgot the weight of his company, forgot even his grief for a few precious minutes. The lullaby that had once stilled his son now calmed him too. One afternoon, Lena found herself alone in the studio. The rain outside tapped gently against the tall windows. Adrian entered quietly, his jacket still damp from the weather. "You did not go home yet?" he asked. She smiled. "The piano needed tuning. Besides, the storm sounds better with company." He chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. "You have a habit of turning ordinary days into music." She looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "I suppose it is the only way I know how to make sense of things." Adrian hesitated, then stepped closer. "You know, when you sang on that plane, I thought it was just a small kindness from a stranger. But lately, I keep wondering if it was something more." Her heartbeat quickened. "More?" He nodded. "Maybe a reminder that there is still light even when you think it has gone out." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was fragile, charged with something neither dared to name. Then the sound of small footsteps broke the silence. "Daddy!" Adrian's son, Eli, ran into the room, clutching a stuffed bear. The boy's face lit up when he saw her. "Miss Singer!" Lena laughed softly. "Eli, you remember me." He nodded with excitement. "You sang my song." Adrian's eyes softened as he watched them. It had been years since he had seen his son smile so freely. Lena knelt beside Eli and began to play a few gentle notes. The boy sang along, his voice shy but bright. When the song ended, Eli threw his arms around her neck. "Can you sing it again tomorrow?" "Only if your dad brings you to work," she said playfully. Adrian smiled. "I think that can be arranged." As the evening lights dimmed, he helped her close the piano lid. "Thank you, Lena," he said quietly. "For today and for everything else." She looked up, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the studio. "You do not have to thank me. Music finds the people who need it most. I think it found both of us." Adrian nodded, his gaze lingering for a moment longer, before he turned toward the door with his son. But as he walked away, he could not shake the feeling that fate had begun to write a new melody for them, one neither of them was ready to hear yet. The day of the Harmony Foundation's gala arrived with the kind of anticipation that made the entire city hum. It was a celebration of the program's launch, a night meant to honor music, compassion, and the people who had made it possible. For Lena Torres, it was her first public performance in years. She had written a song for the event, a new version of the Lullaby, arranged with a children's choir. She stood backstage, smoothing the folds of her simple navy dress, her heart thudding like a drum. The sound of conversation and clinking glasses drifted from the grand ballroom beyond the curtains. The air smelled of roses and polished wood. She could hear Adrian's voice somewhere in the distance, greeting guests, dignified yet warm. When the stage manager called her name, she took a deep breath and stepped into the light. The orchestra began softly, and her voice rose above the music, pure and trembling, carrying the same sincerity that had once filled a quiet airplane cabin. The audience grew still. Some closed their eyes, swaying gently as if the melody spoke directly to them. Even Adrian, standing near the front, felt his throat tighten. For the first time in 2 years, he felt truly at peace. When the song ended, the hall erupted into applause. Lena bowed modestly, her cheeks flushed. She did not know that this very moment was about to change everything. As she turned to step off the stage, the host's voice filled the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the visionary behind the Harmony Foundation, our founder and chief executive officer, Mr. Adrian Hale." "Mo?" The audience cheered again as Adrian walked onto the stage, tall and composed, his son watching proudly from the crowd. But when Lena saw him, her smile froze. The name echoed in her ears. Adrian Hale. The words seemed impossible to reconcile with the man she knew, the quiet, gentle father who had invited her to join a cause she believed in. He approached her with a warm smile, unaware of her shock. "Lena," he said softly, "you were wonderful." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You are the founder?" He hesitated, realizing too late that she had never known. "I wanted you to feel free to create, without the pressure of who I am. I never meant to deceive you." The crowd clapped politely, oblivious to the storm brewing between them. Lena forced a smile for the cameras, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. Every image from the evening, his tailored suit, the luxury venue, the flashing lights, felt like a betrayal. When the applause faded, she turned and walked quickly off stage, her eyes burning. Adrian followed, catching up with her in the hallway lined with portraits of donors. "Lena, please listen," he said, his voice low. "I did not hide the truth to hurt you. I just wanted to be seen as a person, not as a name on a building." She shook her head. "You should have trusted me enough to tell me. I thought we were creating something honest." "We were," he said firmly. "We still are." "Oh," her voice trembled. "Maybe for you. But I have spent my whole life surrounded by people who pretend to care. I thought you were different." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Lena, you changed my life. Please do not walk away." Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Then why do I feel like just another story for your company to tell?" Without waiting for an answer, she turned and disappeared into the night. The sound of her heels faded against the marble floor, leaving Adrian standing alone beneath the golden lights of the ballroom. The applause from the stage echoed faintly behind him, but for the first time since his wife's death, Adrian felt a silence even deeper than grief. It was the silence of losing something he had just begun to believe in again. The city had already forgotten the gala by the next morning, but Lena Torres could not. The glow of stage lights and the roar of applause had turned overnight into the dull ache of betrayal. She had spent the night walking through quiet streets, the hem of her dress dragging across wet pavement, her thoughts replaying the moment Adrian's name was announced again and again. When she reached her small apartment, the early dawn light had just started to slip through the blinds. She hung her dress on a chair, sat on the edge of her bed, and stared at her old music notebook. The same notebook he had returned to her with such tenderness now felt heavier than ever. By noon, the internet had done what it always did. Headlines spread across news sites. Billionaire CEO and his new discovery, from airplane to foundation stage. Photos of her standing beside Adrian circulated online, some calling her the mysterious woman who captured the widowed tycoon's heart. She turned off her phone, her chest tightening. Everything she had worked for the program, the children, the music, was now painted as a publicity stunt. At the same time, in his office high above the city, Adrian Hale sat at his desk, scrolling through the same headlines with a growing sense of dread. He had tried calling her all morning. Each time the call went unanswered. "She deserves better than this," he muttered, rubbing his temples. His assistant stepped in hesitantly. "Mr. Hale, there is talk among the board members. Some believe the story will hurt the foundation's image. They are suggesting you suspend the partnership with Miss Torres until things calm down." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Absolutely not. She is the heart of that program." "But sire," I said no. His voice was sharp enough to silence the room. When the door closed again, he looked out the window, watching the city stretch endlessly below. For years he had been surrounded by people who obeyed him, people who agreed because of his name. Lena had been the only one who treated him like a person, not a billionaire. And now he had lost her. That evening, Lena returned to the community center. The children were waiting, unaware of the rumors. They ran to her, laughing, tugging at her sleeves, asking for songs. She smiled faintly and sat at the piano. Her fingers trembled as she played, but when the first notes filled the air, the noise inside her heart softened. After class, one of the mothers approached. "I saw you on the news," she said kindly. "Do not let them change who you are. My daughter has not stopped humming your lullaby since she met you." Lena blinked back tears. "Thank you, that means more than you know." Later that night, she sat alone in the empty room, staring at the piano. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what music is for, to survive the noise." Across the city, Adrian watched the same foundation's donation numbers plummet as online gossip grew. Investors began to question his leadership. A rival executive leaked a story accusing him of exploiting volunteers for profit. It was not just Lena's reputation at risk now, it was his company, his integrity, and the cause they had built together. He picked up the photo of her taken at the community center, the one where she was surrounded by children, eyes full of light. "I will fix this," he said quietly. "Even if it costs everything." Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping against the glass in a rhythm that sounded almost like the lullaby that had once united them. But this time, it played like a reminder hope could still exist, even in the middle of heartbreak. A week passed, and the storm around the Harmony Foundation only grew louder. Gossip shows twisted every photo, every headline, every moment between Lena Torres and Adrian Hale into something scandalous. Donors began to withdraw, board members whispered about replacing Adrian, and the foundation's reputation was collapsing. But that Friday morning, the front doors of the community center opened to a surprise. A line of trucks arrived, carrying instruments, sound equipment, and boxes marked with the Harmony Foundation logo. Children crowded the windows, pointing excitedly. And in the middle of the commotion, Adrian stepped out of a black car, carrying a single folder. Lena froze when she saw him. She had not expected to see him again, at least not like this. Her heart raced, torn between anger and something she refused to name. "Why are you here?" she asked when he approached. "To do what I should have done from the beginning," he said calmly. "Tell the truth." He called the children and their parents together in the courtyard. Reporters, already lingering nearby, rushed closer as he stepped forward to the microphones. The crowd hushed. "My name is Adrian Hale," he began. "I built the Harmony Foundation to heal people through music. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that real healing only happens through honesty. This woman, Miss Lena Torres, saved my son on a flight when no one else could. Her kindness reminded me that compassion is stronger than status, and it is the only reason this foundation exists today." Gasps rippled through the audience. Adrian opened the folder and held up the first page. "These," he said, "are the donation records that prove every dollar has gone to music programs for children. The rumors about profit schemes and manipulation are false, and if anyone doubts it, I am releasing the full financial report publicly." The reporters erupted with questions. Cameras flashed. Lena stood still, stunned by what she was hearing. Adrian turned back to her. "Lena, I did not tell you who I was because I was afraid. I wanted to be seen as a man, not a title. But in hiding, I hurt you, and I am sorry. You are the soul of this foundation, and without you, it means nothing." His voice trembled slightly as he added, "If stepping down is what it takes to make things right, then I will do it." The crowd murmured. A few parents began to clap, followed by others, until the courtyard filled with applause. Reporters shouted more questions, but Adrian ignored them, his gaze fixed only on Lena. Tears blurred her vision. She stepped closer and whispered, "You would give up everything for this?" He nodded. "I already almost lost everything that mattered." In that moment, something inside her softened. The anger that had built like a wall began to crack. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the same quiet man she had met on that plane, holding his crying child, desperate for peace. The foundation's director approached, breathless. "Mr. Hale, the news is spreading. People are responding. Donations are coming back in. They believe you." Adrian looked back at Lena, a small, exhausted smile forming. "Maybe they should believe you instead." The children began to sing softly, the lullaby she had taught them. The same melody that had started everything now echoed across the courtyard, pure and simple. Lena's eyes glistened as she joined in. The song grew stronger, the crowd falling silent to listen. When it ended, Adrian whispered, "Now they know the truth. You were never just a story, you were the reason." And for the first time since the night of the gala, Lena smiled, not the polite smile she had used for cameras, but a real one, born from forgiveness. The past could not be erased, but maybe, just maybe, it could be rewritten into something honest. A month had passed since that day in the courtyard. The Harmony Foundation was alive again. Donations flowed in, new volunteers joined, and the children's music program expanded to 3 more community centers across the city. But for Lena Torres and Adrian Hale, the change that mattered most was quieter, gentler, something that grew in the spaces between words. Lena had returned to the foundation, though not right away. It took time, long conversations, and quiet understanding before she agreed to come back. Adrian did not rush her. He gave her space, showing through actions rather than promises that she could trust him again. Every morning, they met in the studio to work on new songs for the Foundation's outreach project. Some mornings began with silence, but it was the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. Other days, they shared coffee, laughter, and stories about their childhoods. Slowly, the walls between them dissolved. One evening, after the children's rehearsal, Lena found Adrian sitting alone at the piano. His jacket was folded neatly beside him, his tie loosened. He was playing a slow, hesitant version of her lullaby, his fingers stumbling over the notes. She leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "You have improved," she teased. He laughed softly. "That is generous of you. My son says I play like a broken music box." "Well," she said, walking toward him, "then maybe you just need a better teacher." She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching, and guided his hands across the keys. Together, the melody began to take shape, fragile but steady. As they played, Adrian spoke quietly. "After my wife passed, I thought music had left our lives for good. Then you appeared, and suddenly it felt like the world was humming again." Her eyes softened. "Grief does not mean music is gone. It just means it is waiting for the right moment to return." He looked at her then, truly looked, and something in his gaze made her heart ache. "Lena," he said, "you do not just teach children how to play. You teach them and me how to live again." The room was still except for the faint hum of the city below. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I want to start a new project, one in your name. A scholarship program, Lullabies of Hope. It will help young musicians who cannot afford lessons." Her breath caught. "Adrian, you do not have to—" "I want to," he interrupted gently, "because kindness should echo." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "You are turning a moment on an airplane into a movement." He smiled. "You turned it into one first." Outside, the city lights shimmered like constellations. The piano keys reflected their glow as their hands rested side by side. For the first time since they met, neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. Later that night, as she walked home beneath the streetlights, Lena looked up at the stars and thought about how far she had come from a girl singing to comfort a stranger's child to a woman whose voice had changed countless lives. She knew there were still scars, still shadows of doubt, but something inside her had shifted. She felt it in every breath, every note, every heartbeat. In the distance, she could almost hear Adrian's piano, playing the lullaby once more. The song was no longer about loss. It was about renewal. And for the first time, Lena believed that maybe healing was not about erasing pain, but learning to let love grow around it. A year later, the Harmony Foundation celebrated its first anniversary with an open concert in Central Park. The stage was simple, framed with white lights and wildflowers. Families filled the grass, children waving handmade signs that read, "Music heals." The evening air was warm, threaded with the sound of laughter and tuning instruments. When Lena Torres stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted with applause. She wore a soft ivory dress and carried her old music notebook, now restored and framed on the front page of the program. Behind her, the children's choir stood ready, faces glowing under the lights. In the front row sat Adrian Hale with his son, Eli, perched on his knee. The boy clutched a small silver pendant, shaped like a musical note, the same symbol engraved on the new scholarship fund that bore her name. Lena smiled at them before turning to the microphone. "This song began high above the clouds," she said softly. "It was once a lullaby for one child, but tonight it belongs to everyone who believes kindness can change a life." The orchestra began, and her voice rose clear, steady, filled with warmth. The children joined her, their harmonies blending with the hum of the city beyond the park. People stopped walking, strangers held hands, and for a few moments, the entire place felt like one heartbeat. When the last note faded, Adrian walked up to the stage. He took her hand, eyes shining. "You once said music finds the people who need it most," he said. "It found me, and it brought me home." He knelt, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The crowd gasped as he opened it to reveal a delicate ring. simple and luminous. Lena, you healed my family. You gave us hope. Will you build the rest of our story with me? Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. The choir began to cheer, the children clapping wildly. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger as the crowd rose in applause. Above them, the city lights shimmered like distant stars. The lullaby returned once more, carried on the wind a song not of sorrow, but of beginning. For the first time, both of them were home.